When we think about Anne Boleyn, we mostly think about her relationship with Henry VIII. And I would argue that is probably the least interesting relationship of her life. I mean, and that's probably why I wrote the book, Thorns Lust Glory. When people ask me, why did you write this book? I wrote this book because I wanted to know more about Anne Boleyn and her French relationships. I wanted to understand the dynamic between Anne Boleyn and the French ambassadors, between Anne Boleyn and the French royal family. So I thought that I would explain to you a bit more about what I've done, the bits that you can look forward in the book, answer any questions you may have in the comments. So let's dive in. We have this big question of when was Anne Boleyn born? And for me, it is definitely 1501, 1500, 1501, and it can't be really the date of 1507. And I'm going to explain to you why. We know for sure that Anne Boleyn was in Mechlin in French, about 1513, 1514. And then we know she was at the French court in 1515 when she was supposed to be in the household of Mary Tudor, the sister of Henry VIII, who had married with the 12 of France. But we also know that then she was part of Queen Claude's household. So it is very unlikely that this woman would have been 8, 9, 7 years old. It is more likely that she was actually 15, 13, 14, 15. And it makes sense because at the time, there is no importance on the teenage years. Once you're a woman and you have your period, once you're 13 and you have your period, you are a woman. So it makes sense to send a woman abroad for education, though it is very rare. And I think here we have to pause a minute to realize what Thomas Boleyn did here and how crucial it was for Anne Boleyn and how we remember her. I mean, this is quite remarkable that a courtier and diplomat who was rising at the English court really wanted his daughter to be well educated. But not just that, when you think about it, he wanted her to be well travelled. And it's exactly what happened for Anne Boleyn. What's also very remarkable when you think about what happened here is that Anne Boleyn spent 1 to 2 years in Mechlin at the court of Margaret of Austria. There she learned French and she learned so much. I mean, there's such a big influence. Margaret of Austria is such a strong woman. And it's not the focus on my book. I have to tell you this because I don't want you to be disappointed and say, oh, Estelle, you said that, but then you don't really talk about Margaret of Austria in your book. No, because my focus of the book is really the betrayal of Anne Boleyn. And when I say betrayal, I mean the French betrayal. You can see there's a fleur-de-lis on the cover, to give you a hint on what I'm going to write and what I'm going to discuss about in the book and in this video. But what's so incredible as well is that then she spent 7 years at the French court. 7 long years. And not only that, she traveled in France. So the things that you can look forward in my book is the October 1515 trip to Provence, where basically it's a Queen's progress. You have Louise of Savoy, Queen of Claude, and please watch out for videos on those two remarkable queens, very unique queens. I'll discuss in my videos why. So these two women, and also Margaret of Angoulême was the sister of Francis I. These 3 queens went on progress from Paris or Parisian region to Provence, and Anne Boleyn was part of that progress. She went down, she traveled France. And you might think, oh yeah, okay, yeah, that's absolutely unique. How many English women not only went to France, to the French court, but then traveled in France? And not just travel, I want you to imagine that all times that they stopped in a city, everything was prepared for them. It cost a huge amount of money, and I'm not sure the people were very happy with that, but that's beyond the point. Can you imagine how they felt? The grandeur she was experiencing, almost the magic she was seeing. They went to Provence to welcome the victorious king, Francis I, who had won his big battle in Marignano. And here it's all about splendor, glory, Thorns Lust Glory, and obviously grandeur, as I said. And we cannot say, oh, but that's not very important. And I'm not saying that I'm the one who discovered this. I'm not saying that. However, in my book, you can expect lots of details. You can expect to be drawn into that time, that you're in the progress with Anne Boleyn and the Three Queens, that you are in it with them. I go very much into details because I found a source that is very detailing. Like, it tells you the weather. It tells you, for example, that it was very sunny or it was very very cold, and all of these little details, or if it was raining. And it's a beautiful account of what was going on. A reliable one as well, I would say. And it's just massively entertaining. But it's so vivid. You know, there are not many primary sources. I say that I'm wrong. There are lots of primary sources that are vivid, that make you feel like you're traveling back in time. As that's definitely one of them. So that's one thing that I can expect in my book, Thorns, Lust and Glory. The few other things that I can expect is this relationship, this kind of complex relationship, not between Francis I and Anne Boleyn. Hot and cold, not just hot and cold, like you almost have this feeling that Anne Boleyn is a substitute French princess and that Francis I is supporting her. But what's unclear is like to what point, to what game, and that we tend to forget that he also had his own political agenda and diplomatic agenda, and that means that Anne Boleyn was not at the top of his priorities, and I think obviously she's going to learn that the hard way. Then there's also the relationship between Anne Boleyn and Jean du Bellay. Jean du Bellay is a fascinating figure. For me, he's completely intriguing, and not just him, but his family. He comes from a family of diplomats, and again, I'll make a video of him because I think you will be so interested in his education, his brothers, his life, and his patron, Margaret of Angoulême. Yeah, this month is really about Anne Boleyn and the French and about my book because it's the release of my book and I really want to share all of the details with you. Also, I think what's so amazing and entertaining and so intriguing is obviously the complex relationship between Anne Boleyn and Margaret of Angoulême and the lack of evidence so far in the archives. I went to the Gloucester History Festival and I had an amazing time. I gave a talk with Professor Yanina Ramirez and Stephen McGann about the women in history. And what was so amazing was that we discussed basically the different dynamics and what was happening. And here I was explaining that Margaret of Angoulême is a very complex figure. And that you can understand that, you can see from, if you just look at the archives, you're going to think that Margaret of Angoulême didn't really care about Anne Boleyn. Like she kind of forgot her. It's what it says at the back of my book, the mentor who forgot her, Anne Boleyn. But at the same time, what's so intriguing is that we have a relationship between Jean du Bellay and Margaret of Angoulême. And in my book, I also explain to what extent Jean du Bellay really helped and really supported Anne Boleyn. And if you think if it's just here and there and he was just listening to what Francis I wanted, yes and no. I think there's someone else who was behind him. And Margaret of Angoulême was his patron. She means she was paying him. Especially chapter 10 is called An Impossible Mission. And I was completely shocked at what I was reading and what happened and the extent in which Jean du Bellay really tried to help Anne Boleyn. Obviously, I discuss Anne Boleyn and her relationship with other ambassadors, and they're not all good. The worst one is probably with Chabot, who absolutely dislikes her. And so that's the thing. But in the epilogue, there is something very, very unique. In the epilogue of my book, I discuss one of most important findings of my book. The reason why it's in the epilogue and I discuss it this way and why I didn't use the sources I'm going to explain to you what they are is because I'm a serious historian. If I can't prove for sure, if I don't have all the evidence backing up my theory, I won't pretend that it exists. I need to be 100% sure. However, it doesn't mean that what I found, I can't discuss it and explain it to you. So for example here, there is this man who has written a book, a novel. It is basically a historical novel based on the life of Anne Boleyn. And he claims that there's only 4 letters that have survived of Anne Boleyn during her time in France. I haven't found these letters, but he said they exist. And he wrote that in 1837. So you might think, oh my God, it's just another who's just lying. At the same time, when you look into it, so I looked into the family history, I looked at who he was. So he was the brother of someone with a big reputation. His brother was a big poet. So putting both their reputation at risk, saying that they were just like, making things up, it's hard for me to believe. But it could be possible. But the thing that really intrigued me was the fact that their family, so it's a French noble family, was actually cousins with a du Bellay family. And here it just clicked in my head. How many letters are there in private collections in the French noble family, in the English noble family, that they still have, that sits in a cellar, or, in a library, or, wherever they put things, and that we still don't have access to? It made me believe that it could be possible that Jean du Bellay, who was so close to Anne Boleyn, had seen these letters, that she had given them to him, saying, oh, look, there's letters that I wrote to my friend Anne Savage when I was in France, and she gave them back to me, and now I'm giving them to you because I want you to remember me, or, something maybe weird like that. And that he kept it in his family, to the point where his descendants, shared them with the author of that book. And that is why it's claims. However, I have to say that these letters, if they're real, are bloody groundbreaking. But the premise, like the way he wrote them in the book, and obviously he doesn't refer to them, because I think if they're in private collection, obviously he's not going to say like private collection in my house, and also there was not like this kind of rigor when it came to writing history books or even historical novels. But when I say historical novel, I just think that he says it's history, it's all true, but he writes like me, he writes it like a novel. And the thing is, like, he's definitely romanticized the letters. So I was really careful into what using and not using. In my epilogue, you'll see something else that I find very unique, is how the French remembered Anne Boleyn after her death, centuries after her death. And I left, it's a play, and it's beautiful, and I don't want to spoil it for you. It's in my book, and it's so beautiful. It's an exchange between Elizabeth and Anne. An imaginary scene, and it's about queenship. And it literally brought me to tears. So yes, Thorns Lust Glory is not your typical biography of Anne Boleyn. It dives into her relationship with the French and answers the question if the French betrayed Anne Boleyn in the end by not rescuing or saving her. Read the book and you'll find out. Thank you so much for watching. I'm so happy to share more videos, and these videos are going to be about Queen Claude, Louise, and obviously Jean du Bellay. I look forward to share more with you. Bye!